Prepare to be immersed in the realm of the unexplained. Paranormal M is where the ordinary ends and the extraordinary begins. Join us on this thrilling journey by subscribing and enabling notifications to ensure you never miss a spine-tingling moment. My uncle visited me the day of his death. I'll start by saying that my uncle, my mother's brother, had been quite ill for some time and was living in Guadalajara, Mexico. My family lives in Southern California, and I haven't seen him in 20 years since we couldn't afford to take the whole family to Mexico for regular visits, but we would speak here and there throughout the years. On Easter Sunday, my husband and I were putting up a new gate, and he and my son had made it the day before. I turned around to grab a tool and saw a tall, dark man with messy, curly hair walking toward me from the backyard. He came around me and then disappeared. Full disclosure, I see figures quite a bit, so this didn't really scare me. Yet, when my husband came back, I told him about the man and described him. He didn't recognize him, but we joked that it may have just been a nosy spirit wanting to see the quote-unquote construction happening at the house. Later that day, I took my kids to my brother's house where my mom is currently staying. She received a call from my aunt, her sister, but my mom didn't want to answer right away. She wanted to play with the grandkids and said that she would call her later. After I got home, my brother called and said that my aunt had called to try to tell us that her uncle Rito died earlier that day. My mother was devastated, and after speaking with her and consoling her, I remembered my encounter with the dark figure. I searched through some old pictures. As I said, I had only a 20-year memory of my uncle, and I realized that that's who visited me. Except for one thing. My uncle was short, maybe 5'8", and this person was about 6 feet tall. But they both had curly, disheveled hair, had a bit of a potbelly, but still thin in the shoulders and legs. I haven't told my mother because I don't want to make her feel bad, but I think it may comfort her to know that my brother came by to say a final hello and a goodbye. Something used to harass me and my brothers in our beds. When I was growing up, whenever my brothers or I were too sick for school, we'd be expected to stay in bed and rest. No TV, no video games. And this was long before smartphones were a thing. My mother was a nurse and she would stay home and care for us. She would come into my room periodically and ask if I needed anything, and monitor my temperature. If I'd been sleeping, I would sometimes wake up to the sound of her opening the door. I would then hear her footsteps on the carpet as she crossed the room, and I would feel her sit down at the edge of the bed. After a moment, I would feel her place her warm hand on my forehead to check whether I might have fever. I would then either open my eyes and have a small chat, or sometimes just fall back to sleep without saying anything. The routine had been the same my whole life. One day when I was 13 or 14, I was homesick. I had been napping on and off throughout the day, and it was now mid-afternoon. My mom had come in to check on me 4 or 5 times. I was lying on my side with my eyes closed and I heard the door open. I heard footsteps walking across the room. I felt my mom sit on the edge of the bed, the soft mattress dipping dramatically beneath her, and the blankets pulling tight across my shoulder. I wanted to feel her hand on my forehead, but it never happened. I opened my eyes and turned out to look at her, only to see that there was no one there. I was confused. I shrugged it off and I went back to sleep. Fast forward a few weeks, and it was the middle of the night on a school night. I was roused from my sleep by the sound of my door opening. I heard footsteps walk across the room. I felt Mom sit on the edge of my bed, the mattress dip, and the blankets pull tight. I wasn't sick at the time, and even if I had been, I don't recall Mom ever coming in to check in the middle of the night. I figured something must have been wrong, so I asked, "What's wrong?" No answer. I reached over and turned on my lamp. No one was there. I was confused again. So I shrugged it off and I went back to sleep. Fast forward a few more weeks, and it was the morning and I was getting ready to leave for school. I used to ride my bike to school, but on that day, Mom insisted on driving me. It was just me and her in the car. As we neared the school, she pulled over to the side of the road and asked me if I'd noticed anything weird lately. I asked what she meant, and she kept it kind of vague and just anything weird. I told her about the couple of things that I could have sworn that my mom was coming into my room and sitting on my bed incidents. Not really sure if it was the sort of thing that she had in mind. She then told me that one of her brothers had been experiencing the same thing. After that, things got a bit more distressing. I would sometimes hear what sounded like footsteps walking on the roof in the middle of the night. And I would get that sense that something dark would loom over me at night. It would feel like all four corners of my mattress were being sat on at once. Or sometimes it would feel like something was lying beneath my bed and pushing up on the mattress from below. Going to bed became a source of great fear and anxiety. I'm sure some, if not most, of these experiences could have been in my mind, fueled by fear and adrenaline playing tricks on me. Sometimes I would hide under the covers, and sometimes I would hurl myself out of bed and flick out the light switch as I ran out of the room. These experiences persisted for months, and at the time my younger brother was reporting his own terrifying nighttime experiences. I'm sure that we were contributing to each other's fears, and the level of hysteria in the house was quite high at that time. The final part of this story happened one night when I was home and my older brother was hundreds of kilometers away at a school camp. I was woken from my sleep when I felt something in my hair. I first thought that it was a large spider or a cockroach crawling in my hair. I reached up with my hands and tried to catch it or brush it away, and the sensation came back. Something crawling through my hair deep down near the roots close to my scalp. I sat up in bed and with both hands ruffled through my hair until I was convinced that I had evicted all the unwanted creepy crawlies. I sat still for a moment and didn't notice any more movement, so I lay back down and tried to get back to sleep. Suddenly it felt like a hand grabbed my hair and gave it 2 or 3 violent tugs, then let it go. That terrified me. I pulled the blankets up over my head and kept them there for the rest of the night. In the morning, my older brother phoned us from his school camp. He was talking to Mom when he mentioned that he'd had a bad night's sleep and had resorted to wearing his beanie because it felt like something had been pulling his hair. I hadn't mentioned my hair pulling experience to anyone at that point. After that, my mom sought advice about what to do. Had someone come and cleanse the house, and would be regularly performing cleansing rituals herself, including smudging and reciting verses and leaving Bibles out around the house. Things improved soon after that, and the nighttime encounters practically stopped. A woman's voice tried to lure my brother and I toward it. This happened around 20 or 25 years ago. I don't remember the exact year. I must have been around 10 or 13 years old, and my older brother is 2 years older than me. When I was a kid, every year for Easter school holidays, my family would go out camping on some land that my grandparents own. The best thing about it was having somewhere to legally ride our motorbikes. My older brother and I would often jump on our bikes and head off riding around the property together, racing and making up silly games. One year we were both out riding, but had gone our separate ways, so at this time I was on my own with no one else anywhere in sight. Suddenly I heard a voice say my name. I heard it clearly over the sound of the 2-stroke bike engine, and it didn't sound muffled through my helmet. It sounded more like it was being spoken directly into my ear, or as if I had a headphone or an earbud in my ear. At first I disregarded it. I thought maybe it was some strange interaction of the exhaust sound, the ear cavity of the helmet and the wind blowing across the helmet visor, basically some kind of auditory illusion, but I heard it again and again, the woman's voice calmly saying my name as if to get my attention. It would occur when I was riding in one small area and nowhere else. I'd say the area was a radius of 50 meters to 75 meters, and it was an area that we had to pass through to get to camp from the motorbike trails and back. The voice persisted for days in the same spot, and it increased its vocabulary. It would sometimes say my name, and it would sometimes say, "Come home." And it would sometimes say, "Come to me," with my name in there too. It started to creep me out, and I would feel anxious when approaching the area where it would happen. After a few days and me not saying anything about it to anyone, I was out riding with my brother, and he signaled me to stop and pulled up right in the middle of the area I'd been hearing the voice. He turned his bike off and removed his helmet, so I did the same. We then had a short conversation where he asked if I'd been hearing anything weird, and if so, what? I told him I'd been hearing a voice. He went pale. I described the voice, and he said that it had matched what he was hearing. I asked what the voice was saying to him, and he told me that it would say his name and tell him to come to it. We rode back and forth and told her parents. Dad came out riding in the area with us. He didn't hear anything, and we didn't hear anything while he was there either. We kept hearing the voice over the next few days, always saying the same things. I remember this happening just 1 year, but I brought it up with my brother recently, and he seems to think that it also happened in the same place the following year. Scary man in the picture. 2 years ago, I took my wife, my father, and son, then 3 years old, to visit family in rural New England, America. They live on a small farm with buildings that date back to the 1700s, which have been restored and modernized, and a guest house, which has been built about 20 years ago. My cousin is a prolific photographer, and my auntie had decorated most of the rooms for the main house and the guest house with her photos. We didn't notice much about the photos in the guest house when we first arrived, probably because we were all just jet-lagged. The next morning, after a sound night's sleep, we were sitting in the main family room eating breakfast and making plans for the day, when I noticed that my son was keeping his head down and not answering my father whenever he spoke to him, which was unusual because even at that young age they were very close. I looked over to my dad and noticed that he was sitting in front of a photo of a room in a rundown house. The room had a large window with sunlight streaming in, casting shadows across the length of the room toward a dark corner. I got an uneasy feeling from the photo, but didn't think much of it. We finished breakfast, and we all got up from the table, and I noticed my son was walking in a wide arc around the end of the table where my father had been sitting. Again, weird behavior, but I just dismissed it as a weird 3-year-old thing. Over the next day or so, I noticed him becoming more and more uneasy any time that we were at the dining room table, and doing whatever we could to avoid looking at the photo. I decided to ask him what was wrong, and he answered me very matter-of-factly. "The bad man in the picture is looking at me. He's very cold, and he's not nice." I looked back at the picture and got instant chills down my spine. There was no man in the picture, but I got the feeling that there was more to it than an empty room. I decided to ask my cousin about the picture. She told me that it was taken at an abandoned farm a bit further upstate. It was one of her favorite pictures, but had always given my aunt the creeps, so it was moved to the guest house. Over the next couple of days, whenever I'd ask my son about it, he would say things like, "The bad man is looking at me. He doesn't like me. He wants to hurt me." I didn't think much of it until we were going to bed one night and my son tripped and fell, seemingly for no reason in the middle of the hall, and started crying hysterically. When I asked him if he was okay, he said the bad man hurt me on the leg. I checked his leg, and sure enough, on the side of his leg there was a large bruise that looked like he'd been struck with a blunt object. I didn't want to play into his fears, but I asked him how the bad man could hurt him if he was in the photo downstairs near the table. His answer was enough for me to pack all of our shit and move to my main house, with my aunt, uncle, cousins, and a big burly housekeeper right away. He's not down there. He comes up here when we go to bed. We left soon after, so I never found anything out about the farm where the photo was taken, but I'm sure that there is some kind of evil presence around it. The heavy pillow. I remember being 15 years old. I never really believed in ghosts or anything, and I thought everything was just a wild coincidence. I was a skeptic, to say the least. One night, it was me, my girlfriend at the time, and a friend all in my room at night and early morning. My girlfriend always slept with the pillow between her feet. Don't know why, but that was just her. So this night, my buddy was on the top bunk while my girlfriend was on the lower one with me, and she felt something heavy on her legs right where the pillow was, and for some reason all of us were just kind of freaked out. My buddy comes down, and I go to the corner of my bed with my girlfriend. My buddy just goes to the other corner, grabs the pillow that was between her feet, and places it near the edge of the bed, and suddenly says, "If there's anything in this room, sit down on the pillow." Me being me at the time, didn't believe a damn thing and just kept my cool. It was basically saying everybody's acting ridiculous while simultaneously looking at the pillow. Literally a few seconds later, there's a butt print going down on the pillow in front of all three of us. And at that point, my body felt cold. I was too afraid to scream or do anything. My girlfriend was beyond scared, and my friend just began to cry. None of us knew what to do, and we ran out of my room to the outside yard and just spoke about what we saw to make sure that we weren't all going crazy. I'm 31 now, and I'll never forget that day. Although that was my first encounter, I've had plenty directly after. And just speaking about it gives me goosebumps and still scares me and makes me feel uneasy. I felt compelled to just let it out, hoping it'd give me a moment's peace. Two examples of my many weird experiences. As a kid, I would see things that might have been spirit guardians, angels or demons or ghosts, who knows. Random people or creatures seemed to visit me. Some only came at night, but plenty came during the day. I had a huge crush on a classmate of mine, this cute guy named Kevin. He wouldn't say much, but he'd wave at me sometimes and ask me to play with him. One night I dreamt that he was hit by a train and certain organs were missing. I went to school and wanted to tell him about it, but he didn't show up. In fact, I never saw him again, but when I asked him about him, neither my classmates nor my teacher knew who I was talking about. For the next thing, I'd like to add that I was born with some version of synesthesia, which causes me to see colors around every living thing. It allows me to kind of see emotions. Sounds weird, right? Well, it is. But what's weirder to me are the visuals that aren't linked to anything living. A guy I knew once took me to the park near his house. I'd never been there before, and I didn't know this guy very well yet. I told him about this stuff, and he asked me if I saw anything in the park. I pointed out 4 spots in the park. 2 were spots that were violent crimes, and they were taking place there. One was the spot where the emergency helicopter always lands, and the last was a spot on a low bridge. That's where he told me and his sister had fallen from the bridge and drowned. I heard a voice, but nobody was there. So this was about 4 or 5 years ago. Not too sure about the dates, but here's what happened. I went away for my parents' friend's birthday. We went to a place in Italy. I can't remember the location, but we all slept in this old cottage and the owner lived next door. Everything was okay for a day, and then weird things started happening. Like I'd go to sleep, I'd close the bathroom door, and then I'd wake up and it would be slightly open with the light on. It was just small stuff like that. Anyways, let's get to the day where it gets even weirder. So everything was going good this one particular day. Small things were happening in my bedroom, but I thought nothing of it. We went out for the day and came back, ate, then chilled. Fast forward to the night. I did what I did every night. I went to sleep. I closed the bathroom door and turned the light off and then fell asleep. Next thing I know, I wake up and I heard a little girl's voice saying, "Help me." I tried getting back to sleep, but I noticed that the bathroom door was open slightly and the light was on. I left it like that and I went back to sleep. I woke up again to the same voice saying, "Help me, please." She sounded young, like 7 years old, maybe 8. I stayed away as I couldn't get back to sleep and I was genuinely terrified. I managed to entertain myself when I heard the voice shout, "Bree," continuously. I tried getting back to sleep, but I couldn't. And this all continued to happen, and it was like 5 a.m. before I shouted for my dad. I told him everything that's happened, and he said nobody was in the room and nobody heard anything. Let me help you sort of picture how the room was laid out. The door was on the far left side of the room, and the bed was placed in the middle between the side table and the door. The bathroom door was on the right side of my room, and on the wall next to me, if that makes sense. Anyways, as the day went on, and I was more and more scared and didn't want to stay in the room, so later on that day, the owner of the cottage's grandson came to visit, and they had a swing outside in the front, so me and the boy decided to go swing and talk. I mentioned what happened, and he said that he stopped in the cottage once he heard his name being called, and the same situation happened to him. The rest of the time that we were at the cottage, I kept away from that room, and nothing more happened. I haven't been back since, and now I'd love to, as I'm fascinated with the paranormal. Also, just so nobody can say, it was probably someone playing a prank on me. It was confirmed by the owner that there's a little girl ghost in the room that I slept in, who says people's name, but also apparently she's completely harmless. The Man with a Soft Face. It first happened when I was 4 years old. I had a very strange dream where I saw a very tall, maybe 6'5" creature. Its skin was pinkish brown and it had bulging eyes, a red round nose and triangular teeth in its wide mouth. The creature was smiling, and its smile reminds me of what people now call uncanny valley. Both sadistic and happy. Also, even though I don't remember it in details, the creature seemingly had 4 fingers on each hand. In my dream, it tried to catch me, grabbing and carrying me somewhere. I attempted to fight it, trying to punch its face, but my fists got stuck in it, as if it was made of bubblegum. This is why I called it the Man with the Soft Face. But that dream was not the end. It became recurring, and I saw this creature in my dreams till I was 6. Sometimes it was just carried, or it would just carry me somewhere without saying anything, and sometimes it started choking me from behind. But the scariest part that made me fear this thing was its smile. Not even the feeling of total helplessness. Not that I had in these dreams, not as disgusting to the touch, the warmth and the sticky body in which my hands always got stuck. Its smile was the worst. Why did it always look so happy? Once when I had this dream, this creature was carrying me somewhere at night in the middle of the street. It was snowing and I could hear its feet stepping on the snow. I saw the street lights, the buildings, and the creature's face smiling as always. Strangely enough, its eyes never expressed anything. Total empty look. It carried me for a couple of minutes and then just stood somewhere. After a while, another creature approached. It looked similar to the Man with the Soft Face, except its nose was long, like that of Pinocchio. The Man with the Soft Face showed me to the creature, and they started to discuss something. I don't remember what they said. I don't even remember their voices, only the creature's lips moving as they were speaking. When I was 6, these dreams stopped, but I still remember them quite vividly, and they still feel scary. Has anyone else seen anything similar? I'd be glad to know if anyone else encountered this creature in their dreams. Paranormal experience in a friend's home. When I was about 17, I stayed at a friend's house overnight. We were up quite late, giggling and messing around in bed. You'd come into the house, and in the living room was on the left. Through a short corridor on the left was the stairs. Straight on through the corridor was a biggish room that mostly had lots of boxes and unused stuff, below my friend's bedroom, which then led to a small kitchen. Her dad's room was on the right when you came up the stairs. Her room was on the left and the bathroom along a landing leading from her bedroom, so it was directly on the left of her bedroom. The layout helped set the scene a little as quite late at night. Way after midnight, and we'd all gone to bed, her dad included. I started hearing noises downstairs. The noises seemed to start directly below us in an unused room. I whispered to my friend about it, who couldn't hear anything. At first, it sounded like a dull thud followed by a dragging noise, moving slowly through the room. My friend kept trying to whisper to me as normal, but all I could focus on was the noise getting gradually closer. As soon as I heard it reach the bottom of the stairs, I started panicking, whispering to my friend about it and feeling more freaked out when she still couldn't hear it. It felt like time slowed down as the same noise moved up the stairs. Thud, and a long scrape. I was crying a bit quietly at that point, hoping that if I pretended to be asleep, then nothing would happen. I remember feeling like I was aware of my presence, even at that point. My friend was silent too, and pretending to be asleep, because she'd often be spooked by me. It finally got to the top of the stairs and went silent as it reached and stood outside her bedroom. I was holding my breath at this point and staring into the dark, hoping it would stop. It started moving again into the bathroom and then stopped as suddenly as it had started. After that, I felt instant relief and like a pressure had been lifted from the air. We went to sleep and we didn't mention it again or to anyone else. I slept at their house quite a lot, but never experienced anything like that again, and never felt worried about being there afterwards. Another reason to hate dolls. So this happens a long time ago. My family and I love going to garage sales and thrift stores. My parents are very friendly and polite, and people like them pretty quick. So they've been offered several times to take stuff for free and even had these type of deals. You can have everything for free, but you have to take all the stuff. So we've ended up with a truck filled with random garage sale items in the process. One time my mom and I were in her bedroom, checking the loot of one of these type of deals, and we were having a good time while sorting all the stuff. We got to a big trash bag that was filled with dolls. There was a lot of them, so I decided to just open the entire bag and put them all in bed. So we started checking the dolls one by one, choosing what to keep for my sister, what to give away, and what to throw away. Since most of these deals included taking some trash, but we didn't really care, it was fun. We have a half bag sorted out when we get this tumbling doll that supposedly can do flips. My mom likes it. Looks like new and seems like a fun toy for my sister, so she wants to keep it. She asks me to test it and see if the doll, actually tumbles, but the batteries seem to be dead. Tried again, now with the new brand of batteries, but still no luck after a few minutes. So I conclude that the doll just must be broken and that it didn't work. So I take out the batteries and place the same old ones back in and put the doll back on the bed. We keep sorting stuff. 15 minutes passes, My mom and I were taking a break just chatting when suddenly we hear this loud noise that sounded like gears in an overcharged motor. We look at the bed, and the sound comes from the doll, and right in front of both of us, the doll turns its head at me and says, "Mama!" The movement was so abrupt that I even feel the bed shaking a little. My mom and I look at each other and saw her face turning white. I just punched the doll as hard as I could, landed on the other side of the bedroom. We went immediately to the kitchen to calm down and explain what just happened to my dad. After a few minutes, I go back to the room with my dad to investigate, trying to find out what just happened. Then my mom enters a full rage mode, goes for the doll, puts it in a plastic bag, asks my dad to take it to the trash and out of the house. My parents are religious, so after that, they were praying and blessing the entire house for almost an hour. Never seen my mom that scared. It truly felt like a scene from a terror film. I expected the doll to get up and attack me at that moment. I don't really believe in paranormal stuff, even though I've had a couple experiences that really scare me. And up to this day, I have no explanation for it. And this is one of them. Growing up, I always hated dolls, and I was scared of them, even to the point of having really bad, effed up nightmares. Good thing this happens when I was older, around 16, or I'd probably be traumatized. What still bugs me is that even though if I find a rational explanation for why the doll worked again with dead batteries, with the power switched off and by itself, the doll wasn't a baby doll. It was a gymnastic doll that was supposed to do flips. As if it wasn't new and no box. I probably will never know if this is one of those features, and I'm okay not knowing. Something was there in my room that night. So it happened a few years ago, sometime in winter in 2016. I randomly woke up in the middle of the night, and the first thing I noticed was how dark my room was. It was supposed to be dark as I had all the lights off and the windows closed. But a little tiny bit of light from the outside street always finds a way to enter from the edges of the closed windows. Like you can barely distinguish the pitch black from the slight aura, right? But there was none of it. It was pitch black all around. I thought it was probably a power cut. I started to think random stuff like, probably this is what blind people see all their life. Must be sad. And slowly drifting back into sleep when I was suddenly reawoken by a feeling of my bed shaking. I thought I'd fallen asleep, and this is one of those sleep jerks that happen when you fall in your dream. But then more stuff started to happen. Soon after the first shake, there was a second one, which I felt much more clearly. A big rat had been invading our kitchen for a while, and I thought maybe it had sneaked into my room. But how can a rat shake my bed? Then, a few seconds later, I felt a literal punch under my bed, as if someone punched the underside of my bed, like right under where I am. I felt my bed bump up right around my back. Oddly enough, instead of freaking out, I became extremely calm for some reason. And oddly enough, again, I started to think of a logical reason. My mom made me check underneath the bed before sleeping, and as she thought some thief might have sneaked into our home, she overthinks. I thought maybe someone actually sneaked in this time, but why will he disturb me instead of, And I felt another 2 consecutive punches from under me as I'm thinking. I froze for a solid minute, finally realizing things might be abnormal here. Maybe I'm bragging, but after freezing initially, I went weirdly calm again, almost as if my brain went, "Oh no, it's a ghost anyway." Then was a final punch, followed by the bed shaking. I remember as the bed was shaking that I got up almost subconsciously, walked straight to the light switch on the other side of the room and turned on the lights. Nothing out of the ordinary. I looked under my bed with the flashlight. Also nothing. I should have freaked out here, but I didn't. which is odd for someone like me who gets nervous and shaky from even the simplest of social situations. My body worked almost like its own here. I turned the lights off, took the flashlight with me to the bed, and fell asleep as soon as I hit the bed. And then it was morning. Nothing ever happened after that. I've experienced several different apparitions over the years, but there's one that I think about often. This story goes back a while. I'm 40 now, and this takes place somewhere between the ages of 17 and 20. It was a summer night, and a few of my friends and I were hanging out along with this girl from across the street from my friend's house, who we used to vacation here with during the summer at her grandfather's house. We were hanging out staring at the stars on this large trampoline, talking about our thoughts of life, the universe, and whatever we were thinking at the moment. The girl, who will remain nameless, and I really start to hit it off. We were flirting, and I ended up holding hands for a while. When it was time to go, I walked her across the road, and we were hanging out in the front yard. Kissing followed, and it started getting a little bit more hot and heavy. She decides that we go inside to her room, but her mom was sleeping, so we had to be quiet. This house is an old bungalow, so it's small and an odd setup. We open the exterior door that enters into the kitchen, and she sneaks across quick to her room at the opposite side of the kitchen. I step in, close the door, and start across. As I'm walking slowly, I look up toward the living room to make sure her mother isn't watching us sneak in. I freeze. She's looking at me from the doorway and says, "Hurry up, what are you doing?" With 6 to 8 feet from me, there's an old sofa chair, and I can see an old man sitting in it with his back to me. I, without taking my eyes off of him, say, "There's a man sitting in the chair." Her response is, "That's not funny, that was my grandfather's chair." I realized he's not moving, and I think he's sleeping, and then it clicks. Was. I slowly look at her and say, "I'm not kidding," and he's sitting right there. I'm now pointing and look back, and he's gone. Now I'm freaking out but trying to keep my composure and stay quiet. I leap from my spot where I was frozen to the floor right into the doorway where she was standing, and we close the door. She's slightly upset and thinks I was messing with her. I assure her that I'm not, but she doesn't believe me, but we eventually start kissing. And again, I try to get back into it, but neither of us can let it go. I keep saying something along the lines of, "I can't believe what I just saw." She's on and off being mad, and I would mess with her like that, and it just keeps saying, rather she keeps saying, "That's not funny." So as you would think, it didn't go much further, and I ended up leaving for the night. We did hang out again, and we did make out a couple of times while we were partying, but it was never the same, and it went nowhere. She would never talk to me about it, and I think she always had it in her head that I could be just messing with her, or maybe it was just freaky that he appeared to me. Apparently, he died that winter before, so it was soon after. The next winter, my friend calls me. The house is on fire. They were back home in their state for the winter, and the house burned to the ground the year of him dying with no explanation of what started the fire. Something weird happened when I was a kid, and I can't explain what it was. I don't remember exactly how old I was, but I must have been maybe 10. And I was with another 2 friends, one my age and the other one was 4 years older than us. We'll call them Ava and Jenny. We were in Ava's house, and it was a 2-story house in my town. The lower ground was a long garage that could fit several cars, and the first floor was the actual house. To get in the garage, there was a door on the left side of the staircase. She had her play area at the end of the garage, opposite side of the entrance, and about 3 to 4 meters of where her toys were, there was a storage room where Ava's parents would keep winter clothes, costumes, and the like. I was very used to her house, and she would celebrate her birthday in that garage, and I visited often. We must have been playing for a while when we swapped games and opened a dollhouse. I must say that there was no creepy talk at all, just 3 girls playing with the doll family. A bit later, I started feeling something in that storage room that I mentioned. I remember this moment crystal clear, but I'm not sure I can explain what I felt. I've never experienced anything like that again. There was just something not nice in that room, and I just didn't want to be there at all. I didn't see or hear anything, but I had a very strange feeling toward that door. I'm not sure if it was something evil I felt or if it was just a strange feeling, and because I was a kid, I didn't understand exactly what it was. But it was emanating from that room. It felt like the door was going to open wide by itself. The joyful playing stopped, and the 3 of us went a bit quiet until we realized that we were all feeling the same thing. Unprompted and without any prior talk, we shared what we were feeling and started moving in the opposite direction from the storage room. The 3 of us were scared. Ava and I tried to get Jenny to check it out because, of course, she was the oldest. But she completely refused. We ended up rushing up and tidying up the toys so that we wouldn't get in trouble and sprinted toward the door and left to go upstairs. We were pushing each other a bit, and we were the last one left in the garage, but I ended up being the last one myself. The light switch for the garage was on the right-hand side of the door, so Ava went first and opened the door. Then Jenny, and when it was my turn, I slapped the light switch off and we went upstairs in complete darkness. That's just how scared we were, that we didn't even turn on the light of the staircase. Fast forward a couple of hours later when we were in Ava's bedroom, back to playing and feeling went away and we felt safe again. Ava's mom came back from work and went up to check on us. She asked why we left the light on in the garage because she just parked and all of them were on. Now I'm 100% that I turned them off. We crawled through the stairs in complete darkness after all. So how the lights were turned on is a complete mystery. Unfortunately, I haven't kept in contact with Ava or Jenny, so I can't ask if they remember any of these experiences, but from my memories from my childhood, being as vivid as they are, and this particular one has always been there, I've never felt or experienced anything like that ever again, so any input is most welcome. What my father saw made me a believer in the paranormal. My father's a policeman, a no-nonsense guy who lives very much in the here and now and believes only in what he can see and feel or hear himself. At the time of this story, he was in the police force for more than 20 years and I was a teenager. My father worked night shifts and on a regular basis he would come home early in the morning to have breakfast with us before he would go to bed and he would go to school, or we would go to school. He was in the police. He would usually be in a pretty good mood and tell us funny or interesting stories from his day or night at work. At this morning, he was unusually silent, and he didn't eat either. My mom asked if he felt all right. It took a while to actually get an answer, but he said, "I'm not sure what I experienced tonight." He didn't want to say any more in front of us kids, but we prodded him enough and long enough until he told us the following. It had been quite a night, and he was out with his colleague in a police car. At some point, they were informed over the radio that a car chase was going on not far from them, and their assistance was required. They drove off toward the chase and soon caught up with the suspect's vehicle. The radio had informed them, and 2 men were in front of the car. My father's car pulled up almost beside their car so that he managed to get a good look in the inside. He saw that 2 men in the front were arguing heatedly with each other, and he saw another man in the back. He had no hair and he was so pale that he seemed almost white. He was dressed in all black, and he looked directly at my father, his face almost pressed against the window, with very dark eyes, and he grinned widely. My father was deeply unsettled by this person. He seemed to look directly into my father's eyes, and my father was so sure of this third person that he informed the other police cars about him. The chase ended with the car crashing into a fence and the suspects fleeing into a field. They were apprehended only minutes later. There were 2 men, not 3. My father asked all of his colleagues at the scene if they were sure they hadn't seen another guy. No one else had seen the third man. "I can't explain it," he said to us. "I saw him as clear as day, and he grinned at me like death himself." This took place in 2004 and 2005 in Germany. To this day, we have no logical explanation for what he really saw and experienced. Strange woman in my dream. This event happened to me last summer. First of all, I'd like to say that I'm more of a man of science than a man of faith. Even though a few strange things have happened to me in my life that I've not really been able to rationally explain. It was the beginning of August and nothing special was happening in my life. I had a period of depression, but it was no strange thing to me. I've had it since I was a child, and it always passed. I have dreams almost every day, and this night was no exception, but this time it was completely different. I had a nightmare in which there was a tall, pale woman with black eyes and black hair. She looked almost human, but there was something inhuman about her. I guess I can't fully describe what it was just my feeling. She looked very nice to me, and her voice sounded sweet as she spoke to me. But even in that dream, I knew that her intentions with me were not good. I don't remember her words. All I know is that the expression on her face gradually changed and she was mad at me. I woke up sweaty and my heart was pounding. I've never had a similar nightmare that would have such an effect on my body. But that wasn't all. My thoughts were hazy, and one thought resonated in my head. Kill yourself and you will be fine. Kill yourself and it will all end. It will be okay again. You don't belong here. I've never thought of hurting myself in my life. I love life and I love people. Like it wasn't even me. I got out of bed and went to the kitchen where I drank a glass of cold water and my thoughts slowly faded from me. I was a little shaken, but I still thought it was just a really bad nightmare, so I went back to bed and fell back asleep again. Nothing more happened that night. I woke up in the morning before my girlfriend, which I thought was pretty weird because she's a morning person in our household, and she looked very tired when she came to the kitchen. I asked her if she was okay, and then she replied that she just had a really strange dream. I told her to tell me the details. In her dream, we were in our bedroom. My girlfriend was awake in the dream, but I was asleep. A strange woman was sitting on the edge of the bed. She looked at her and then pointed at me. She told her, "You have to help me kill him. He's worried here. He doesn't belong here. If you help me, he'll be happy again. You want him happy, don't you?" My girlfriend started arguing with the strange woman. The quarrel led nowhere, and the woman attacked her. My girlfriend fought the strange figure, tugging at her hair and scratching her face. She said that she felt like she was really hurting her because the woman had disappeared with a scream. At that moment, I was staring at my girlfriend in disbelief and asked her one more thing, even though I knew that maybe she knew the answer. I asked her what the woman looked like. Yep, you guessed it right. Tall, black hair, fair skin, big black eyes. She says she'll never forget how she grinned at her. I realized one more thing that morning. My depression was over. I felt as if someone had lifted a heavy stone off my chest and I could breathe freely again. Nothing like this has happened to me since. I'd love to know what those dreams meant. Shadow Man encounter? ? So take it back about 3 years. I had just finished my workout for football, and I'm happy heading home to relax for the rest of that Saturday. My family was out of town for the weekend, so I was home alone. I proceeded to make food and watch TV in the living room, and keep in mind, it's about 1 in the afternoon, when I just get an odd vibe. Not really sure how to explain it, but as if I had a perception to know something was danger. 30 minutes go by and I can't seem to shake the feeling, so I decide that I'll watch Netflix till I fall asleep. I don't remember falling asleep, but I wake up with my eyes closed and proceed to stretch my body from being sore. I sit up on the couch, wipe the crust from my eyes, and look to see if the television was still running, and I noticed that it was still light outside, because there was a dark thing in my vision, and I try to readjust, and I finally realize that there's a shadow of a man standing there facing me. My mind feels as if I'm being fried with information and it's processing whatever it is that I'm seeing, and as I sit there dazed and confused, the shadow was in the shape of a man, and it was about 8-9 feet tall. The shadow lowers its hand down to me in a gesture and leaves it out there outstretched. There were no words that were spoke, but in my head I could just feel that the meaning was to take the hand. At this point, I'm beyond scared because I think I'm going to die. I have no idea what to do or even what to think. So in desperation, I close my eyes and I go into prayer, and I ask God to just let it be quick if this is how I go. Please let it be fast. And about as quick as I was rattling it off in my head, the feeling that I had that was unsettling just went away. And I opened my eyes, and the shadow with this outstretched hand wasn't there anymore. This was pretty long, but I had to get the whole scenario down so I could get some help in what I actually experienced. I know the argument of sleep paralysis is going to be made, and what I have to say is that I stretched and I sat up, and that I wanted to assume that it was sleep paralysis as well. I don't really know how long it was for this all to take place, but it felt like hours, and the presence of the shadow wasn't anything I'd ever experienced in my life. The Thing with Red Eyes. I'm kind of bad at writing, so I apologize in advance. This is also all true, and it might be brutal to narrate. Let's go. So I like to explore abandoned places. Me and my friend were walking through the woods, and we were finding an old mine shaft. It was about 8 p.m. last Saturday, so as we were walking, all the animals would go completely silent randomly, and shortly after, we would find a bunch of flat stones stacked on top of each other, along with branches crackling and rustling in the woods. This happened probably about 4 times, so further in the woods it became completely silent and stayed that way. So during this walk, we're looking around when my friend spots these red eyes in the distance, about group height, whatever that means. We stopped for a bit and just stared at it. We got kind of bored, so we continued on our walk. We soon spotted them again, but this time waist high, so we ignored it and continued on. Once again, we came across the eyes, but this time they were closer and about 5 feet tall, leaned slightly to the left behind a tree. I should mention that we forgot our flashlights, and did this whole thing with the lights on our phones. Our light source didn't really go out that far, but we sat there looking at this thing for what felt like an hour. We could see it blink and look around, but it never moved. Occasionally, we would get the smell of rotted flesh, and at this point we said, "Fuck the mine, we need to leave." I knew there was an old road not far from where we were headed, so we headed towards that. But we came across what I think was a coyote. Big-ass dog-looking thing. So we debated if we could walk around it, but by the time that we decided and realized it, we had become surrounded. We had 6 of these animals around us in every direction except directly behind us. In that instant, we looked at each other, pulled out our buck knives, thinking we'd rather die fighting. But the coyotes never approached us. They just stood in front of us. So, He suggested that we would just walk backwards till they left us alone. As we walked backwards, the coyotes followed us. But if we started to go off left or right, they would kind of jump at us. We made it out safely, but looking back now, it's been almost a week since this happened. I kind of feel like coyotes were guiding us to safety from whatever thing was there with the red eyes. But I'm no quitter. Me and my friend will be going back to those woods again as soon as I get a weekend off. I need to know what those red eyes were, and I really want to explore that mine. That was written perfectly fine. The Hat Man visited me in 2013. This story happened about 8 years ago, and it still pops into my head from time to time, so I thought I'd share it here. If you've experienced anything similar to what I'm about to tell you, please let me know. So, it was around 2013, and little 12-year-old me was laying in bed. It was probably around 10 p.m., I'm assuming that, because that's usually when I went to sleep. I was laying on my side facing a wall, and I heard what sounded fairly close to me like walking. Thought nothing of it because I thought that maybe it was just my sister or something going to go use the bathroom. From what I can remember, the walking was very slow-paced, which I thought was kind of weird. The walking then stopped, but I didn't hear the door open for the bathroom, and I know that I'd have heard it knock because it's just across from my bedroom. After a while of facing the wall, I decided to turn onto my other side, which would have meant that I'd now be facing an open room. When I flipped over, I gasped and froze. I couldn't move at all, and I was holding my breath. I will never forget what I saw. It was a tall man dressed in a long black cloak with a big hat on. The man was very tall, and I know this may sound odd, but he was darker than pitch black. Darkness that swallowed my room. He was standing in the farthest corner in my room, just staring at me. He didn't move whatsoever, and neither did I. I don't know how long I was frozen staring at him, holding my breath for. It could have been a minute, but it felt like forever. I can't describe the terror that came over me when I saw him standing there. I can't even remember what I was thinking at the time. Then I woke up in the morning. I don't even remember falling asleep or exhaling. I just woke up. Now, some of you may be thinking, that was all probably a dream, maybe even sleep paralysis. I would think that too, had it not been for the 2 large footprints in the carpet right where I saw him standing the night before. I did take a picture of the footprints, but sadly the picture's gone. I've looked for it everywhere and I just can't find it, so you'll just have to take my word for it. I told my sister about what I'd experienced the next morning, and she said, "Have you ever heard of the Hat Man?" I said no, and she explained to me who he was. After researching a bit, I found that there are a few people who've also seen this man, and they also say that he doesn't do anything but stare at them. It's been 8 years and I haven't seen him since. Maybe it was all my imagination, but it felt so real. I refused to sleep in that room for years after that because I was afraid I'd see him again. Luckily, I never did, and I hope I never do. Ghostly phone call. I live with 7 people. 4 of us reside upstairs and 4 downstairs. The downstairs entrance is at the back of the house, so I didn't really see much about the inhabitants. This particular night, my parents and sister weren't at home. The people downstairs were home, but everyone was locked up after 8 p.m. I did the same and decided to get an early night's rest. Around 1:30 a.m., I heard a loud banging sound coming from the front door. Thinking it was my family finally home, I tried to get up, but there was a heavy, invisible weight on me that prevented me from doing so. Also, my family had a key that they couldn't open the door easily with. And usually, even in my sleep, I hear the front gate opening, but I didn't hear it unlock or even open. Strange. I eventually got up, and it was as if something possessed me to pick up my cell phone. I hurriedly made to the front door, which was not too far from my room. The banging was louder now, and it was closer, and the door was shaking. Then something made me stop. My parents would call my name no matter what when they came home, and they wouldn't be violently banging on a door like that. I quietly went to the room nearest the front door and peeped out of the window. The banging was still occurring, but there was no one at the door. Then, at that moment, my phone rang. I answered, and a man with a gruff voice said, "Open the door." At this point, I was terrified. Obviously, I did not open the door. I texted the number and even tried to call back, but each time I called, there was static on the other side. I don't know how I managed to sleep that night, but when I woke up, I immediately told my family about the incident. They tried dialing the number as well, but again, static. Later that day, I found out that the number was out of service and had been so for the past 20 years. It was definitely one of the scariest experiences I've ever had. Demonic encounter. When I was younger, my parents had gotten divorced. My dad was an abusive alcoholic who drained my mom of a lot of money. So my mom and I left, and at the time my aunt offered to let us stay in her house until we got back on our feet. Now my aunt lives in a rural part of the country. It's miles of farmland and a few houses every now and then. Her neighborhood is small, but everyone keeps to themselves. The area my aunt lives in is called the base. Apparently, soldiers were housed there and eventually died and were buried in those lands. Don't know the exact history, though. Driving to her place at night is super creepy and confusing. You can easily get lost, so everyone aims to reach home before the sun sets. Now, back to my story. My aunt had a second house not too far, where her family would go and do gardening and just chill sometimes. So my cousins and my aunt there thought that it would be a great idea to spend the night. The house was an old abandoned Baptist church converted to a house that my aunt inherited. The previous owner was a seer woman and would do readings and even exorcisms for people. My aunt took care of her when she was ill, so she gave the house to my aunt. The inside was run down. One couch for about 10 of us. Yep, big family. And a dirty bathroom with an annoying leaky pipe. Light barely entered the house during the day, and also gave an eerie vibe because being in that house or land, it was always dead silent despite being surrounded by nature. That night, we all had these little rooms to sleep in, so being so much as we had to share, my mom and I were in one room, and when I woke up to the sound of a wooden door being creaked open, I turned to see my mother upright, shaking, obviously full of fear. No one came through the door, but you can hear these loud, heavy footsteps around and inside the house. It woke everyone, so we all huddled in the living room. All of a sudden, the lights cut off. We lit some lamps, and my uncle was getting ready to check out the noise outside when a loud banging came at the front door. It was around 1 a.m. and this place is almost deserted. We all stood still and quiet, and then the banging got even more violent. The door began to shake, and a guttural demonic voice was asking to be let in. Panic and terror struck all of us. My younger cousins began to scream and cry because the voice was unnatural, pure evil. The adults sent us into one room, and they formed a prayer circle in the middle of the living room. Everyone's backs were turned to the window, but I was the only one facing it, and I remember very clearly seeing a tall man with horns and a red aura looking back at me from the outside, and he was smiling at me, motioning me to come toward him. He had these long black fingernails that he began scraping the window with. At this point, everyone could hear it, but the time that turned to the window, when they turned to the window, he had vanished. However, all the doors started banging and the windows were rattling. We kids all ran out to the living room and joined the prayer circle reciting the mantras for my religion, and then it suddenly stopped. The sun was now peaking, and it was 6 a.m. Everything felt like an hour, but we couldn't account for the rest of the time that had gone. We stayed for a few months in my aunt's original house without ever visiting that second house. My mom eventually got remarried, so we moved. It's been about 17 years or so since that incident, and we rarely visit my aunt, like once or twice a year. And since then, however, the house has been demolished. My aunt said that strange things occurred whenever she was on that land after that incident, and she felt like she was being watched. She couldn't handle it and eventually sold the land too. Currently, there are no residents on the land. Something tried to make me commit suicide. It's 2016. My aunt had an event and the entire family was headed there. My mom tried to convince me to go since my aunt lived quite a far distance from where we lived, and it made her uneasy knowing I'd be home alone and they wouldn't get back till late. However, I chose to stay home because at the time I had an A-level exam and I was glad to get alone time to study in peace and quiet. It was about 6 p.m. when my family left. I locked the doors and decided to take a nap before I started studying. I was in the living room on the couch for about 15 minutes when the air suddenly became stuffy. I sat up and looked around, and there was something different. The lights looked dimmer. There was a slightly cloudy look, and the 3 fans, including the ceiling fan that I had on, just stopped working at the same moment, which was kind of strange. Despite the place being really warm all day, I also noticed a huge drop in temperature. As I was about to get up, I started feeling this heavy pressure surrounding me, and eventually it was on top of me. It weighed down on me, and immediately I was engulfed by feelings of sadness and depression. I started to cry uncontrollably and began hearing faint whispers. I closed my eyes during this episode, but when I opened them, I saw I had a razor blade to my wrist. It had only been about 5 minutes. I know I hadn't moved and there were no razor blade flying around. At least any that were easily accessible. I tried pulling the razor away, but it felt as though there was a force going against me, pushing it closer to my wrist. I literally had to struggle to pull it away. As soon as I managed to get it away from me, I felt the pressure of the room increase. I felt a gripping fear and was compelled to run out of the house. I threw on some decent clothes and bolted out of the house. I called my parents to come get me. I locked the door, and I was just waiting outside when the door began to shake violently, as if someone was trying to come out. And it was accompanied by loud banging sounds. I saw my neighbors outside at this point decided to stay in their view until my parents arrived. When they did reach, my mom, who's usually sensitive, felt the sudden drop in temperature and her hairs stood on end. My stepdad, who's a pundit, Hindu equivalent to a pastor, performed a quick fire ritual and smoked the house out. Thankfully, I haven't experienced anything like that since then.